What's up, guys? Steven here today, and today what I wanted to talk to you about are the fucking flavors of engineering. Now, this is probably all too obvious to you already in the sense that clearly we know there's different branches and different fields of engineering, but I wanted to touch on the subtle nuances of each branch and each field that are essentially stemming from pillar fields where essentially you can say there's a clear demarcation between, for example, electricity and water, right? Or water and fire, right? There are clear and distinct boundaries between the two elements, right? Now, in the same way, there's also these different fields, right, where our most of our laws on physics and etc. and our understanding of reality in the world are based on those fields. Now, why do I bring this up? It's because I kind of wanted to bring up this point that with the changing landscape of education and this multi-dimensional environment that's now even comprising the digital medium, where now all your classes are remote, right? And on top of that, because of now the newfound reach, you're able to actually learn and access material that you may not have been able to because of the previous transportation or physical parameters, right? Now, this will bring a lot of game changing elements into play because now you'll be able to learn a lot of cool shit that you couldn't before, right? Just by the virtue of people being forced to upload their shit online. Now, in this, I feel like we kind of have to get a new or develop a new eye for what we're learning because oftentimes there are a lot of like subtle nuances and intricacies that we are absorbing in the material that we find online that may or may not cause confusion when it comes to the application thereof, right? A simple example of this is, for example, some kid who grew up whose father was like an electrician, right? Like worked on literally the kind of guy who would fucking fix the wiring whenever the light went out, right? Or install new plugs just because he wanted to do one thing or the other, right? He grows up with this kind of figure. And so that influences him to essentially get a really solid understanding of what or of how we interface with the raw primal forces, right? And more specifically, how they manifest themselves once converted into a more commercial form, right? So wiring and cables, right? This naturally gets him to have a very intuitive understanding of essentially architecture has from the standpoint of electricity and branch and nodal management, and then even just how that interfaces with the machine, right? So he gets into bit encoding and creating .bit files, and really has doesn't take too much of a liking to the more higher level stuff because he sees it has toys, or maybe he just sees all these discrepancies in the IDE that were never resolved because they were not refactored or made for the kind of engineering that is the person that he is, right? Another person grew up maybe playing MS DOS based games, right? Like fucking Doom 3 and like the fucking 2-bit shit where you're in the maze, you turn, etc., right? And that really, really grows on him and gets him to essentially build an appreciation for structural programming or functional programming in the sense that um, um, you're able to essentially create or develop solution or code that has a clear delineated organizational structure between the definition part, the active use of the class part, the helper functions, etc. in between. And he goes on to become a fucking pro at building auto autoing or basically macros or programs that are phenomenally good at essentially performing repetitive tasks over and over and over and over again, right? Now, in this, you can clearly see that there is a clear difference in what I call the body of knowledge that the particular engineer or the engineering applications are stemming from, right? And more to drive to the point of this video is that one should take notice that in that the courseware, and I prefer that word to curriculum because it's more reflective of the reality of the situation. But the courseware for each person is going to be significantly more customized, right? One person is going to be dealing with the sheer applications or the sheer, or basically racking up reference experiences of seeing the manifestations of energy in the raw primal world, right? Energy has light, energy has a wave, energy has electricity, energy has voltage, energy has a current, etc., right? While the other person is going to see energy being applied has essentially the engine that powers an interface. It's going to be he's going to be dealing with the interface, the user interface, the what I call the screen behind, or the screen empowered by the force at hand, right? And with that, the curriculum and the knowledges that they're going to be learning are on some level going to radically overlap, but they're going to have subtle nuances as far as how they see things. And that's kind of why I'm always harping about the whole perspective equals reality, because the angle or the eye that you're coming from when you view the information directly dictates the way that you see that information being applied, which is why I'm always kind of striving to see things like a fucking retard newbie who doesn't know things and who makes no judgment, so that the most objective view of the reality can be seen and thus not be essentially hampered by or influenced by the ramifications or the labeling of my mind that is essentially caused by the subjective reality that is being, or that is trying to impose itself on the reality or the objectivity of the nature that is being experienced. And to kind of go back, I think in this, you'll kind of get a better appreciation for even your teachers, right? Like, I make the distinction between a teacher or an instructor being someone who just kind of imparts upon you content, and a professor being someone who, from my personal experience, has clearly shown essentially a genuine empathy or level of desire of wanting to impart or transfer said knowledge, experience, and wisdoms upon me for my enrichment in one way or the other. And every time I see one of those people, I always try to like really show my admiration, because if you think about the fact that someone's taking their time in their lives to literally hard code into your being in one way or the other the wealth of experiences that they have gathered up until now, it is something to be appreciative for, right? Especially since gratitude being the currency of the universe, right? Now, to go back, and one thing I'm really excited to see in this coming time is just kind of the new level of dynamic flexibility that professors will be able to get when it comes to essentially sharing their content, because no longer will they be essentially constrained by the parameters of having to cover so much material in so little time, because things will have a playback option. But because of that now, where they are strongly grounded, where they are, that kid that grew up with an electrician figure, or that kid that grew up playing Doom 3, right? And all the things that came from that all of those, I guess you want to call it, uh, knowledge idiosyncrasies where natural passions and talents are really just um, exuberated, or they just kind of like jut forth because they're just so happy to be able to play. Those moments will just naturally outshine or essentially dictate the level of depth that the instructorship or the courseware will essentially touch, right? In another way of putting it, it's like by allowing them to essentially shine their strength, we're able to get a greater value out of the course because now we will know things on a deeper level, and it will make us more prepared by the natural unfolding of sequence of events that arise when someone is really passionate about what they're doing and just how applied they are to the teaching of said material. Will be better off in the end because of that as a whole. And on top of that, it has that added benefit of facilitating things like proving tenure or experience for academic or learning or higher level learning institutions, because the testimony of their character, their expertise, the demeanor or reference, or their ability to show tact and just poise in a multi-dimensional learning environment will just be showcased in that moment, in all the moments, simply by allowing them to be who they are and teach what they want to teach. Obviously, I'm not saying like, hey, let's just cut out entire parts of the syllabus just because this person really wants to talk about this, right? There is such a thing as building a solid foundation, right? But I'm saying, if you can recognize that, for example, not to get nerdy, but a person's primary attribute, or they have a natural affinity to fire or water, then let us allow ourselves to appreciate the value from those things, from a fire driven person or a water driven or water affinity person, as opposed to kind of always trying to micromanage or dictate what they should and should not say or be doing, because ultimately it kind of hurts us. And on some level, I feel like it always undermines that, what I call, that ever game changing freestyle or free radical element that comes from just like allowing someone to speak from their heart and from their mind, and just saying things that they feel should be said because of the forces at hand in that moment. Wow, that was a mouthful. So I guess my point is to say that when it comes to any field in today, just remember that the more freedom you have, the more flexibility you get. But at the same time, the greater your spirit of servitude and empathy and appreciation of these new powers, if you will, are, then the greater the value you will reap and sow, if that makes sense. Anyways, I don't know if this even mattered or touched anyone, but hope you guys get something out of this. And as always, swag the fuck out.